Hello, this is Jim W4JBM, and wanted to do a short video about something near and dear to most radio amateurs' hearts, Murphy's Law. Just, if you haven't heard of it, if anything can go wrong, it will. Definitely manifest itself in a lot of different ways. You might find that the radio you thought was dead, after you go to all the trouble of getting the case off, turns out that the cat had knocked the plug out of the wall or something like that. So a lot of little things that get you, and I figure I'll probably come across a lot over the next few months and years, and thought I'd at least share some of them. I've been working on the Tektronix 310A oscilloscope, and actually have a trace on it now, which is an improvement. But one of the things I was doing was recapping. I went through and recapped the large can capacitors for the power supply. There are also coupling isolation capacitors. Basically, these are put in each stage so that the stages don't interact with each other. A little bit of filtering that's distributed around the device instead of centrally like the large capacitors, which do most of the filtering, but these do a little bit for each little section. And I'd replaced a couple of them, and on one of them I'd noticed that the side was split open, and at first I thought it might have just been ruptured because of something, but when I got it out, it wasn't ruptured. And actually, when they make the tubes for the stuff they roll toilet paper on or paper towels on, anything, they run the cardboard kind of in a spiral, and then they're pushing this off and cutting it. So normally when they rupture, they'll rupture with kind of an angle instead of being nice and straight like this. But I didn't think a whole lot about it, and went ahead and replaced it with another capacitor. Wasn't the prettiest, but it fit and it did the job. This is the original one was 6.25 microfarads at 300 volts. The one that I replaced it with was 10 microfarads at 450 volts. And I mean, size-wise, it's fine, and it's axial originally instead of or radial instead of axial, but I could make it work, make it fit. But after about 15 minutes, the oscilloscope started to smoke, and so I went to try and figure out what was wrong. Shut the power off and looked around, and I noticed this capacitor was bulged. The new one that I just put in. Of course, whenever you fix something, quote unquote fix something, if something does go wrong, the first thing you look at is what you just touched, and in that case, it was the capacitor. And my assumption was it's very difficult to see, but it's ruptured a little bit on the top, not enough so that the electrolytic material comes out. It's also ruptured a little bit on the bottom. The rubber has bulged out a little bit, but not enough for it to actually explode, thankfully. But it was in backwards, and fortunately, with rated 450 volts instead of the 300, it's actually used at about 150 volts. So it was not stressing the ratings, which is probably the only reason it didn't go out with a lot more smoke, flames, and possibly even a loud pop and some material spread around the inside of the oscilloscope. But when I got to looking, I noticed that most of these that I'd pulled out, they had there's an end with some red cardboard, and that end is the positive end, and then on the negative end, most of them are an aluminum plate with a lead riveted in place. On this one, the positive end was actually the metallic end with the lead riveted in place. The side that's marked negative is the one that has the red piece of plastic or cardboard. And so at some point, and then when I got to looking, I actually found, and you won't be able to see this, but there's a score mark down the length of the capacitor. At some point in its life, somebody had taken a knife, cut this open, taken this off, and then put it back on, rotated 180 degrees, so the polarities were no longer right. And instead of double checking like I should have, I just took it for gospel that this was the new capacitor was going with the same polarities that were indicated by the old capacitor, and it was a mistake. So So I did. I put the put a new capacitor in, and things worked great. So little lesson there that you should really, like this one especially, the negative side was connected to ground. It should have, I should have noticed that, but I didn't, and it got me. Another one that was kind of interesting, about a week ago, I was working on a Yaesu FT101ZD, and the clarifier control is basically a fine-tuning control. For those of you that aren't familiar with it, it can be used with as receiver incremental tuning or transmitter incremental tuning. It lets you tune either the receiver or the transmitter slightly away from where the main dial is set. And to align that, you have to initially push it so that the line is straight up, and then it's a control, and it goes one way or the other to take you slightly above or slightly below the frequency on the main dial. I tried to align it, and I found that I had a problem with a capacitor, or excuse me, a relay, and so I replaced the relay. And even after that, I couldn't get it to line up right. It turned out that somebody had taken the knob off and twisted the knob about 90 degrees or so, and then put the knob back on, probably because of the issue with the relay that was making things not line up. So instead of really fixing it, what they did was pull the knob off, which reduced the amount of receiver incremental tuning you could do in one direction, but it kept them from having to open the radio up. So there's little things like that it took me a while to figure out that even though I had the dial marker at mid position, turned out the capacitor or the resistor that it was controlling really wasn't at mid position. Once I figured that out and got the knob back on correctly, got it centered up, then everything was able to align just fine. So anyway, there's always something like that is going on. Just about every major restoration or repair effort, you're going to run into some of those. And like I said, I just thought I'd share some. I'm sure that I will have many more to share over time. Thanks for watching.